Did you know if you're a woman with ADHD, it can take 13 years off your life expectancy? I didn't know that either. And I'm going to be talking to Sue Day, an ADHD expert, about that and why she says it's still worth it. On today's conversation about power, I'm talking to Sue Day, who knows more about ADHD than anybody I've ever met. She knows about what it does to you, what it does to your health, what it does to the way that you look at the world, how people look at you. She's even written a book about it, ADHD Brilliance. And she's going to be sharing some of her insights and facts, the research that she's done in today's conversation. Now, a lot of people who are coaches or healers I know do have ADHD or neurodivergent. So this is going to be a really useful episode for you to find out more about the way that you tick. Right on today's conversation about power, I'm talking to Sue Day. Sue is, well, she's in Oregon. I could say all the way from Oregon, but she's still in Oregon. Sue, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, so we've already had some interesting things happen so far on the call. Not that you could tell if you're listening or watching this, but we have just switched from a laptop to a phone. So, we're ready to go. We'll do whatever needs to be done in this episode. So, Sue, can you start off by telling us who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Sue Day. I run Pathways Forward Coaching. I am an ADHD coach and an author.
Right? That was short and sweet.
Yeah.
So what do you write about, Sue?
I write about ADHD too. I think so. I have a blog and I have a book that I just published, and there is a huge amount of information about ADHD out there, and a lot of it's incorrect, and a lot of it is correct, but in sort of short form and a little bit flippant. It's just like ADHD isn't that important, and then a lot of it is also pretty negative. So my mission in life is to make ADHD better known for exactly what it is, its strengths and its challenges. There's a ton of research going on all the time about ADHD, but there is really nuanced, and so many people have so many misconceptions about it. And if it's not taken care of well, it can be extremely dangerous. It can take 9 years off of a person's life. Yeah, no, it's their big study in Europe just came out actually about that. And in men, it takes somewhere between 4 and 9 years. I don't have it in front of me, and in women, it takes even more years off, somewhere between 5 and 13. So it's more deadly than smoking is. And for a huge number of reasons, because it reaches its tendrils into every aspect of our lives. But it can be a huge gift. I love my ADHD. I am so happy that I have the brain that I have, even though sometimes life is harder because of it. And maybe often life is harder because of it. And maybe I go down paths, as I have done in my life, that are not the healthiest. But I always have this creative drive and this sense of justice and this wonder and excitement about what's around every bend. And I wouldn't want it any other way. So I want people to sort of embrace and love their ADHD at the same time as like, oh, but it's serious. Let's pay attention to it. So embrace it, but also pay attention to it. Right. So that's what I write about.
Yeah, so there's a lot we can explore from that straight away. So can you give me an example of a misconception about ADHD?
Well, one big one is that women don't get ADHD or girls don't get ADHD. Girls often present differently with ADHD, but it's absolutely untrue that girls don't have it. There's actually still no science out that says that girls have ADHD at the same level as boys do, but I'm pretty sure they do. We are just really good at masking it because of how we're brought up, and often we're brought up as people pleasers, right? We're brought up to behave ourselves. And that helps us mask this ADHD where like boys can be boys, right? They can do whatever and they're still like, oh, well, it's just him, you know. So their ADHD is less masked. So I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions for women with ADHD is that, yeah, we do have it and we have it probably almost as much as boys do. It may look a little different, but it affects us as much, if not more, than it affects boys.
Yeah, because what you were just saying about shorter lives, I've never heard that research before. It's a shocking bit of research. So, you know, if I were to think about why that might be, I mean, I know that one of the things about ADHD can be increased risky behavior. But that would be the sort of thing I would expect maybe the guys to be doing more than the girls. But you're telling me that it's has even more impact on women than it does on men. So what reasons are there for that?
Yeah, so the study is new. It just came out maybe a month ago.
Mhm.
So brand new. There's been other research, but this particular study that's been, I mean, it was huge. I haven't read deeply into it yet, but it is assumed, if I think about the past study and some of the other research that I've read, I think there's a higher risk of suicidality. There is an increased stress that can really play havoc on us. And there's even some research that says that this increase in stress increases our propensity for autoimmune disorders and things like that. And we don't sleep as well. So, sleep related disorders with ADHD are huge. I think they're higher for women than they are for men, and that affects us terribly as we age with the heart issues and strokes and Alzheimer's and dementia. All of those are related to this high stress, highly overstimulated brain that doesn't sleep well. So all of those things really contribute to our health overall.
Yeah, wow. That's a complete palette. You know, I know that a lot of people think that ADHD just means that maybe you can't sit still and they
Mhm.
don't appreciate, you know, just how many effects it does have. And what you were just talking about now about the autoimmune situation, I'm reading The Myth of Normal at the moment, Gabor Mate. He's talking about exactly about that and that women generally have more autoimmune responses and his idea is that it also has to do with social roles. Those can be involved as well. So
Mhm.
when did you find out for yourself that you had ADHD?
I don't know what this exactly says about me, but I was actually diagnosed in 1988 when
Wow.
girls were not diagnosed. I was diagnosed after, failing in school. I was about, I had decent grades, but I didn't go to my classes, and I was just kicked out of a private school, which was my sort of my parents' last ditch effort, and they tested me, and they were like, "Yeah, you have ADHD. You should probably go to a different school." But there's nobody believed it, sadly. And so we didn't do anything different, and I just dropped out of school and made my way through life. But I think that I was lucky enough to at least know that I wasn't broken. I had ADHD, even though I wasn't lucky enough to have it treated.
Great. What were the treatments back then? I mean,
I think it was
just
pretty much.
just added that up, and that's what 37 years ago. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I was 16. And yeah, that was the treatments were primarily the same as they are now, which
Right.
is Ritalin or Adderall, or a drug that is similar to one of those two. So, stimulant medication has actually been proved for a very long time to really benefit ADHDers. Almost 80% of us are helped by stimulant medication.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, isn't it? I mean, and that to me is one of the proofs that, you know, an ADHD brain works differently. I mean, you know, my daughter has ADHD. I'm sure she's going to be okay with me saying this because she's very open about it. You can give her as much Red Bull as you like, and it has no effect whatsoever whereas
Right.
I would be going, by that point. But it just
Yeah.
keeps on, yeah, it just does have a completely different effect.
Yeah, it has much more of a calming effect. And there are a ton more treatments for ADHD now that are also different and also non-medication related. But generally that is the gold standard for treatment of ADHD, and that has been. Uh, I'm not I'm not super fond of the fact that it's the gold standard for the treatment of ADHD. I believe that it's helpful. I believe that we should take medication if it's helpful for us and we feel okay about that. But there are so many other treatments that should go alongside the medication.
Right. So you didn't get any treatment to begin with.
No.
Was that partly because people didn't really believe that a girl could have it, or
I don't really know. I don't want to say too much in case my parents listen. I just
time,
don't.
different
It
time?
was a different time, and I don't want to hurt them. But I think there was just this, like misconception about like ADHD doesn't look like what you have. And like, well, it really does. But they just, for whatever reason, they decided that that wasn't what was going on with me. And so we just sort of moved forward without it. And then I tried to get treatment in college. And one of the things that happens is they're controlled substances. So people, if you go asking for treatment, one of the first things that a lot of doctors do is like, are you seeking drugs? Are you an addict? Are you? And that's like the first thing, instead of like, oh, why don't we, assess and figure it out? In college, I was told that if I could read a book all the way through, then I couldn't have ADHD. And I was like, well, that is not true.
If it's an
Well,
interesting book, that is absolutely not true. If it's a boring book, they might have had a point, but yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we don't lack attention, right? We have an overabundance of attention. And that attention needs to be focused on things we're interested in, or squirrels.
Yeah, but
Whatever's sort of in our periphery, we don't have any filters. So
yeah,
like seeing like whatever's moving over there is that's probably why people say squirrel, because if you catch something moving out of the corner of your eye, you're gonna pay attention to it because I don't
absolutely.
have a filter. Hmm.
Absolutely. So so you got the diagnosis, you didn't get treatment. When you went to look for treatment, you were asked if you wanted drugs. Okay. So when did you finally get some kind of treatment that helped you, or get feedback that, hey, this isn't down to you and behavior or whatever?
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
how long did that take?
20 years.
Wow.
So when I was 36, I had just had my kiddo. And it's a very common time for women to finally get help for their ADHD, because all of a sudden, not only are your hormones just totally wacko, but you have so much more responsibility and there's so much more going on in your life all of a sudden. And so when I was 36 and I had my kiddo, I was like, holy crap, I can't function anymore. I couldn't do anything. I was angry all the time. My neck felt prickly all the time, like just super stressed. I was brain fog, and the only thing I could focus on, luckily for me, I could focus on my kiddo, but that was it. There was nothing else. I couldn't do anything else. So that's when I sought help. And luckily for me also, I saw a nurse practitioner then, and I told her my story, and she gave me a survey to fill out. I filled out the survey, and she's like, let's get you on some meds. And it was very immediate, like, of course you have ADHD. This is your, textbook ADHD, and let's help. But then, of course, there was nothing else, right? So I was lucky to have that, but there was nothing else. There was no therapy, there was no life skills or anything like that to work with, just the drugs. And
Right.
again, luckily for me that was there and that they worked for me.
So for people who aren't familiar with ADHD, I got an idea of what you mean when you're talking about some of the life skills, but for people who aren't familiar with it, what kind of things do people with ADHD typically find tricky?
Oh, probably just about everything. We have a very hard time forming routines. I'm 52. I still have to actively remember and make myself go brush my teeth in the morning. Like, I just never formed a routine to say, oh, I wake up, I go brush my teeth. So, from brushing your teeth to falling asleep at night to being able to focus on the things that our society are requiring us to focus on, like having work and doing all the jobs and, and having relationships. So relationships are tremendously challenging for ADHDers. We are highly emotional individuals. And sometimes that's really oppressed and sometimes that's out there, but it always pops out here and there. So having relationships is really tough. Having friends, having spouses, just every aspect of life needs different attention when you have ADHD.
Yeah, I mean, I know there are things around, perception of time that works completely differently, and obviously if you're not into routines, then it's very difficult to keep track of time. I mean,
Hmm.
time is a strange thing anyway, but if but
It's,
if you're constantly distracted or you're hyper focused on something, then
mhm.
you're going to lose track of time all the time, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't have any reward recognition, like, so because of this time blindness that we have. So, like, so say if you're going to have a healthy diet or exercise, the reward for that is way down the road. We don't have that because we either have like our time is now or not now. So
Yeah.
either we're getting our reward now or it doesn't exist. So we don't have the typical motivators either for our activities, especially for healthy activities that may not be as exciting as other activities.
Yeah, and the other side of that is what I've always felt is that with people with ADHD, people are very much in the moment. That's the good thing about it.
Hmm.
It's not generally thinking masses ahead or thinking about what happened 3 years ago very much. It's more about what's happening now. At least that's
Yeah.
the people I meet. That's some of that's one of the things that I think is really really powerful about ADHD, the ability to absolutely be there in the moment, as long as you can focus on what's going on. You know,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. We can do some pretty champion ruminating. If like we said something stupid or something like that 2 days before, we can really focus on that for a long time. But basically, as soon as that ruminating is over, it never existed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Working memory, it's easy to, we also have memory issues. So it is easy to forget things. And sometimes that's good and sometimes it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. It
Mhm.
definitely does have some advantages as well as being a really,
Right.
yeah, yeah. So, okay, so you coach people about ADHD. What's like the most important thing that people with ADHD need to realize about themselves?
Mm. I think oftentimes when people come for coaching, what they're looking for is tips and tricks for how to make it through life with ADHD. And I think, sadly, tips and tricks are helpful in your day-to-day life and not in the long term so much. So I think one of the things that is so important for ADHDers to realize is that this is a long-term sort of experimental process of how are we going to figure out how to make our brains happy and our bodies happy as we move through this incredibly complex and often overstimulating life. So a lot of what I do with clients is, yes, we can certainly work on tips and tricks and figuring out methods to get through day to day, but we also work on like what are the emotions behind all of this is because I really consider motivation as an emotion, and it's certainly driven by emotion. So if we can get our emotions behind what we're interested in, if we can figure out how to put sort of positive emotion on our work and our what we have to do, that's where we can really make some magic happen.
One of the theories that we were talking about when we met previously was the idea that people with ADHD are, originally were the hunters. They were the
Mm,
pioneers. They were the people going off to live in different countries, doing all the adventurous stuff that probably other people would say, "Well, you sure you want to do that?" So, can you talk a bit about that idea and so the sort of the role that maybe that you see for people with ADHD in society?
absolutely. I think, apologize for getting a little bit political here, but I think right now is a time when we actually need the neurodivergence more than anything. ADHDers, they think that ADHD is an evolutionary adaptation for hunter-gatherers when they were running out of food or in a drought or whatever. It's the ADHDers who would say, "Oh, well, that's here, but what if we tried over here? Or what if we tried to dig a hole for water? Or what, let's look beyond our box and think about like how can we actually succeed and thrive because our different creative brains that don't think inside the box, that's where we go. And you know there have been amazing people in the world, Albert Einstein being one of them, who had ADHD, and his mind, brought him to different places that, a lot of people were just like, that was nuts. But he was thinking outside the box. He was thinking creatively. I know he actually had a woman behind him doing a lot of work with him that didn't get much credit there. But I going down a little bit of a rabbit hole there. So what I'm trying to get to is that wouldn't it be what would our life, what would our society be like if we embraced our different brains and the people with different brains and allowed them to think about what's possible and to think about how different ways of doing things and to think about and actually start following people who weren't just like, well, let's keep it the same. Let's make it back to like it was 50 years ago. Let's, what if we looked forward in a way with light and hope and creativity and moved into a different space? And I just think that that's what our brains are for. And I just have so much hope that for every ADHD year, I just hope we can see that. Like our brains are for making things different and better. And it's hard work, but it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. That's a lovely way. That's a lovely way to look at it. That and I think it's true where we've got to a point where we understand that people's brains work differently and that a lot of the way the difference is not it's not a deviation from the norm, so something to be got rid of. It's a different way of looking at life, a different set of skills, a different, with different abilities and different challenges. It's yeah, we should really, really be embracing this. Absolutely.
Mm.
So, what do you think is the most powerful thing about having ADHD?
Mm. Well, we're all unique. ADHD is another thing that makes ADHD a little bit hard to figure out, I think, is that we all have very different brains. But I really think that our biggest power, I think there's two things. Like, people with ADHD and generally people with neurodivergence have an outsized sense of justice and fairness, which makes us very frequently very invested in making the world a better place. And I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if it's wired into our brains or if it comes from the fact that we've had a hard struggle most of our lives. I don't know where it comes from, but it's there in most of us. And we're creative. So not only are we interested in making the world a better place, but we can think of ways to make that happen. And I think those two traits combined are just immensely powerful and so needed.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Mhm.
So, if I say the word power in general to you, what associations do you have with it?
Hey, we talked before. I've always had an uncomfortable relationship with power. I've always wanted to lead from behind. I've always wanted to influence, but not be at the forefront of things. And as I get older and take care of some anxieties and other things, that's flipping a little bit. Now, I don't want to be a power grabber, but I do want to live in my power and appreciate the power that I do have to make people's lives better. And I am slowly becoming much more accepting of the idea that I can do that more if I'm at the front of the room. And so I love being at the front of the room with lots of people. I still don't want to be the only one standing in the front of the room, and I don't think I ever will, but I think that we all have our gifts, and if we try to use our gifts standing in the back of the room, we can't we can't have the effect that we might be able to have if we accept the idea of, "Oh, maybe I could stand at the front and help people on their way."
Yeah, that's another great definition. So, Sue, when do you feel most powerful?
Hmm. It's hard because I still have that sort of uh, cringy feeling about power, but I think I feel most powerful when I'm doing something that fits me, right? When I am in my essence. And that is, and I'm most powerful at those times because that's when I exude sort of my light. So if I'm working in my strengths, if I'm working in my essence, that's when I'm most powerful. That's when I can really influence other people because they see my light. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. So here's a challenging question for you because you just said you still find the word power a bit cringy. So
Mm.
challenge for you. What do you enjoy about power?
So yeah, again, yeah, it's been hard to accept it and see it, but I really enjoy it when I can make a difference. And that's what I've always wanted to do my entire life. I have always wanted to make things better in various ways, but when I see that I can, when I see that I have, it makes me feel amazing. And so I appreciate that question because that's not something I really thought about a lot, because the idea of power is challenging for me, and I think for a lot of women. We're not taught to have power, but when I can make a difference and see the difference that I've made, it's so exhilarating and lovely. And so that's sort of where I appreciate that question. I'm going to think about that more and do maybe some writing on it.
Good, good. Well, I'm always going to encourage you to write about things. Obviously, that can only be a good thing. So, what do you do if you want to feel more powerful? Is there somewhere you go or something that you do?
Yes, there's definitely something that I do, and that is to remember to work in my strengths and to remember to work where my passions are and to remember to work towards my values. If I'm doing those three things, then I am sitting in my power and I can make amazing things happen.
And what would you say to business owners who maybe shy away from power or who don't feel very powerful?
Hmm. I would say that I think we all have, it's like ripples in a pond if you throw a pebble in, right? We all have power to change our environments, to change the things around us. Everything we do has some effect. And so if you're working in your passions and you're working in your values, then those things that you do are having a ripple effect somewhere. And I think just remembering that and knowing that is a big driver. So we don't always see, I guess we don't always see what our effects are, but just knowing and remembering that if we're working in our values, in our strengths, then we are making those changes. And eventually we'll see them.
Absolutely. I've had people say to me, oh, that thing you said in that post 2 or 3 years ago really made me think. And I think, what post? What did I write? I don't remember the post anymore. But that little drop, that pebble, set something off with somebody else. And so you're absolutely right with that ripple effect there. Can have a
Yeah.
big.
Yeah.
Is there any last thing that you'd like us to know?
Well, I think as I've just gone through a little bit of a challenging week or two, feeling like my work is not, I'm not seeing the effects of my work as well as I want to. I think we can all enjoy, or we can all benefit from remembering exactly what we've been talking about power, and that everything we're doing is going to, even if we can't see it right now, is going to make things better. So I think just remembering and not getting so discouraged. Right. Discouragement is easy to sort of wallow in.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're all so good at that, aren't we? Yeah.
Mhm.
Sue, thank you so much for being here today and sharing some of your knowledge about ADHD. And I know you do have a real depth of knowledge about this and how you can best deal with it in your life. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing some of that and some of your story with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for the thoughtful questions. I love every interaction where I learn something new about myself, and I think I've got some things to think about through this as well. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Hey, if you enjoyed today's episode, why not try out this episode or this one instead and find out more about how power can work for you and your business?